just like to point out that feels weird that there's a microphone in my face. Pause. You know?
You put the pause idea in everyone's heads now.
That's how it is, man. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
There you go.
It's a good start.
All right. So introduce yourself, man.
Yeah. So I'm Frank. I do martial arts and study exercise science.
I'm Lawrence. Been studying martial arts since I was a kid, and sometimes I'm a stuntman.
Good stuff. So it's a lot of different areas to cross over, right?
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
difference between stunt work and combat martial arts.
I mean, it's different. It's different, but I mean, it's all there though. It's under the same root.
Yeah. I started seeing some of the commonalities when you were starting to show us stuff.
Right.
You know, because it's more different and alike than I thought at the same time, right? Because, you know, like, I'm sure most of us got inspired by, like, the Jackie Chans or the Jet Lees and the Bruce Lees.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like seeing a little bit of how that's the same, but not the same at the same time.
Yeah, but not a lot of martial arts knows that though. They always assume it's the same, and then and you see a lot of martial artists try to transition to stunts or to like fight scenes. They always have this misconception that they can do it,
Yeah.
but it's actually not. You know, because now you got to learn how to telegraph your hits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you're trying to showcase your audience movements.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, practical martial arts, we need to hide or we need to like keep. We can't telegraph anything.
Yeah,
Or else,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, you don't want your opponent to see it coming. You know.
Yeah. You don't want your opponent to see that you're hurt either.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, have you seen the latest Physical 100 season 2?
Yeah. Watch season 1 and it's a really interesting premise. Like the fact that they had all these different types of athletes. So when it was done, I was like, I'm curious to see how they do a season 2 or if they do a season 2, right? And
Right.
you know, since we're not in Korea, I guess the news kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of us
Right.
here. And next thing we know, the season 2 trailer was out, and then the season 2 show started
Right.
releasing a little bit at a time. So yeah, just went through all those episodes this past weekend.
Wow.
Yeah. What'd you
So-
think, man?
I only went from now I'm on 4
Okay.
or 5, and I think it's pretty good so far, man. Like I think season 1 is my fave, I guess, because there was a lot of characters a lot of contestants that I relate to. But season 2 is kind of like there's a blend of a lot of like everything, you know.
Mm-hmm. There are some things I like so far, even like the first few episodes of season
Yeah.
2 that they kind of cleaned up from season 1.
Right,
I feel
right.
like there's fewer just empty replays.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far in this first segment of season 2, there's not that much of a main character. You know, like the first season, I remember they were all just kind of like, "Oh my god, this guy's coming in, he's a monster," and I was just kind of thinking, I mean, who could this guy be that all these, you know, top level athletes are
Right.
afraid of? And he comes in, it's like he just looks like a college student that lifts a lot of weights.
Right.
But then you start
That's
to see him
crazy.
throughout the season, it's like, oh my god, he is what they say he is.
Wow.
But yeah, season 2, I liked it also because they showcase a little bit more of the combat sports athletes
Yeah.
and the CrossFitters, but a
Yeah.
lot of the combat sports athletes like the judokas, the MMA fighters,
Right.
you know.
Yeah,
so.
definitely have more martial artists in this one. So how you since I know that you're a judo guy as well, how do you like the judo contestants so far?
So I asked my some of my judo training seniors about those guys, and they were really excited to see the older guy, the guy with the blonde hair. He was a 2004 Olympic gold medalist, and he had Yeah, the nickname is Mr. Ippon.
Yeah,
Like he
yeah,
had
yeah, yeah,
ways to
yeah,
get
yeah.
people into an Ippon throw when they
Right,
were grabbing his sleeve.
right. I
Um,
actually learned. I learned that name from the show. Like I didn't know they called him that because of it, but now I know.
yeah, yeah. So it's interesting because outside the U.S. is a different world when it comes to judo, right? Like
Right.
one of my teachers was saying that it's the second most practiced sport in the world,
Hmm.
and the number one most practiced sport in the world is soccer. So it's
Wow.
yeah, outside the U.S., it's kind of easy to forget how popular a sport like that is, because here we got football and basketball, maybe baseball as some of the
Well,
more
yeah,
practiced
yeah.
sports, but
Well, technically, in other countries, it's called football. We
yeah, yeah,
just call it soccer. You
yeah,
know.
yeah, 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 that too. But it probably shows just how revered that guy is, and you could tell by the way those other contestants were reacting to him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. They all knew him. They know his presence and who he is. What do you think of the what is it? I think his name is Lee Dong Hyun, the
yeah,
UFC
the
fighter.
UFC fighter, I vaguely remember him from his UFC days.
Yeah.
I remember him. I just thought of him as the Korean guy who could get the knockout shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
those days, the UFC, that was around the time, I can't remember the exact timeline now, but that was around the time they bought out Pride, or were on the verge of buying out Pride.
Right.
So you were starting to see some more Asian fighters in the UFC,
Right.
but not too many yet, right? So I just thought that was pretty compelling to see him. And yeah, hats off to him because
Right.
he's out there with these guys in their 20s and early 30s. He's in his 40s.
Uh-huh.
Same with that judo player, right? So he's
Yeah.
kind of like a almost like a senior figure, but still
Right.
keeping up with them. So is the overall premise of the show is just really compelling because you have these different body types, and they're
Right.
asking the question about, can you find the perfect physique, and can you really find a perfect physique out of all those types of people?
Mm-hmm.
So it's also cool from an Asian kid growing up in the U.S. is to see that level of athleticism in different areas.
Right.
You got everything. Like you got YouTubers, CrossFitters, and a bunch of other things, as well as those combat sports people.
Yeah, that's why I said season 2 has an array of like different people from different backgrounds. There's a few of them don't even come from a combat or like sports. There's like a tree trimmer girl. There's a cosplay guy. Um,
that was that was that was a moment.
yeah, they have another other guys like they even have a high school wrestler.
High school wrestler, yeah, yeah.
That was crazy.
He looked like a high school kid too. Like
Yeah,
you see him walk in there, he's kind of, he's kind of like a goofy, pudgy kid.
yeah.
His hair's a little bit untrimmed. You
He
kind of look
didn't.
at him
He
like,
didn't. Yeah, he didn't do that bad, man. He was pretty good at what he was doing.
nah, he did well. He did
No.
well, and he wasn't intimidated.
Yeah.
I enjoy seeing that cosplayer because when he first came in, he was walking around with a sword in his
Yeah.
mouth. It's kind of, man, what is going on with this guy? And then they showed a little bit of his actual social media
Uh-huh.
presence. So
Uh-huh.
it was cool because yeah, that was. I remember when I was in college, cosplaying was seen as a really weird, dorky thing to do.
Right. Right. It's
And
taking off now, I guess. Like especially for models.
yeah, I remember going to. Some of my friends were really into that stuff. I was moderately into it,
Right.
but some of my friends were really into that stuff. So we would go to those conventions like back in the 2000s, back when it was
Back
not.
in the 2000s.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's when it was kind of like slowly, kind of getting it. Well, I mean, I mean, I think it was popular though, but
Yeah,
not as big as now.
yeah, it's definitely not as big as now. Like they didn't have the celebrity presence now.
Right.
I also wasn't from a big city area. Like I wasn't from the New York or the San Diego or the LA area. So it was enough. It was small enough to fit inside a hotel.
Yeah.
And after a few years, they had to move it to a bigger performing arts center, and even then, it was barely big enough. Like people would flood the outside, and
Wow.
you know, like basically almost pour into the streets. They had shows outside, so it's interesting to see that transition over the past 15, 20 years or so. So it's definitely more mainstream now. So and I guess this guy just kind of embodies that on this show,
Right.
like the fact that he's on a show that's popular now.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And any contestants that you like?
So far, Amati's pretty compelling, like the
The
CrossFitter,
CrossFitter, yeah.
and also of course the guy who was there last season.
Is that his real name? Because I don't know any Koreans that have that type of name.
He explained the origin of that name. It's not a real name. It's some sort
It's
of
a nickname?
nickname. Yeah. But I don't know what it actually means.
Right.
Yeah, but also the firefighter being back, that's really interesting. I'll be curious to see how he does. As we look
He
at more of these
seems like
episodes.
he's doing good so far, though, man.
He destroyed the running
Yeah.
segment. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think my favorite character will be Thanos.
Yeah, he's a freak.
Yeah, he's a big guy. Like,
Yeah,
I never seen a Korean look like that before, man.
Yeah, he was he's a tall guy too. Yeah, he's and he can run.
Yeah.
Like when they had that battle for the ball,
Yeah.
when he hit that guy, just you could hear that click.
Right.
So
You know what the weird part is? Like, I know, I have a lot of friends that kind of has that same facial structure. That's what and I think that's in Korean what they call it Mongoloid features. Like they have
Right.
that Mongolian look,
Right.
And that's what he looks like. Cause I have a friend named Oogie. He looks just like that.
Yeah.
It's freaking crazy that they all has like similar look. Yeah. What do you think of the two big guys? I think they're stunt guys. They're like stunt guys for movies. They're like one is kind of like overweight, kind of like
Yeah.
myself, and then the other big dude too. They came in suits before.
Yeah, they came in the black suits, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess they're just the guys who could block the doorways, right? or push people away.
Yeah.
It's like every physique is meant for something, and I guess
Right.
that's also what they're trying to show,
Right.
Because you got them, and then you got the people who are like 100
Yeah.
pounds and had the ballerino twirling
Oh
in.
yeah.
That was unexpected, also.
Yeah, that was crazy. That's why I said season 2 is it's interesting, man. So many different people from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
I mean, this time they have bot slaters. They have arm wrestlers, and get this, man. I think they have 3 guys that represents America.
Yeah, they had that one guy, Gibson. He's like
Gibson.
an American soldier.
Right, and then they have the FBI agent.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Hunter
Hunter
or
Lee.
something.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, there was another guy. There is another guy, but I forgot the name.
Right.
Or was he Canadian, Korean, or something? But the actor, one of the actors too.
The action actor.
Yeah,
He's Canadian. I didn't know that.
I can't remember whether. I feel like he grew up in the West. I might be wrong.
Is he the one that's a jujitsu practitioner
Yeah,
too?
yeah.
Oh,
He has a
yeah.
hobbyist, yeah.
Yeah, he does. He speaks English well, so
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Canada though, but he's definitely like an action director. I mean, action actor. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's one guy that's kind of interesting too that trips out my wife is Andrea Jin because he
Yeah.
he looks white, but
Yeah.
he's half white and half Korean.
Yep, half white, half Korean. So I
So-
was reading about him. His father's white, mother's Korean.
Yeah. His mom's like a famous like fashion model in the 80s or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. But he's quite interesting because it tripped my wife out hearing him speaking perfect Korean, But he's what? He's a rugby player? Is that what it is?
National rugby athlete, it seemed like.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a few of those guys too. And
Mhm.
and I can see, why they might be really good for that kind of contest. You got
Right.
endurance, you got strength, you got speed, you
Mhm.
have dealing with physical contact. So who knows? Maybe you'll push rugby a little bit more with the American audience, since we're seeing that here too. And
It's not that popular here, right? Rugby.
I don't think so. I have some
Oh.
friends who play it, but they played almost like in those smaller semi-pro leagues.
Uh,
Um, and they had that one kid, that Korean guy with the man bun, where he was an
I was a
American
football
football. Yeah,
player.
yeah, played American football. Came in with his football pads and uniform.
Is he American too?
I don't know. Yeah,
Hmm.
I have to take a look at him.
There's this one Korean guy that does a very interesting sport, which is an Indian sport. Uh,
How do you say the name
Al,
of
do
that?
you know the name of that?
Yeah, it's like kabaddi or something.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, from what I seen, it looks like they're just playing tag. I don't know. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
It's
yeah,
interesting. I'm surprised Korea had a team on that. Like
yeah.
I never heard it before
From what
or
he
seen.
was from what he was saying in his interview, it seems like he's mostly famous in India. Because he was a top Korean
Oh, okay.
athlete, playing with a lot of the leagues in India.
Right.
So he, I don't know.
So is he a part of an Indian team, or do they have like a Korean team? That's Oh
Oh, okay.
wow, damn, interesting. Huh.
Yeah, but either way, he's got a lot of agility, strength, and
Yeah.
yeah. In the first few episodes, I can't remember if they showed his outcome yet, but
Right.
he did well.
Right.
Like he did really well.
You know what? You know what surprised me the most is that like a few years back, Koreans wouldn't like. I mean, any Asian country wouldn't particularly do like a sport that's from a different country. They would usually stick to their own, right?
Mm.
But I was kind of surprised that Koreans are now pretty open minded. They're doing so many different sports from different countries.
Yeah, yeah. Because Korea's traditionally what is soccer and what else?
Taekwondo.
Taekwondo. Okay. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I think that's about it. But
Yeah.
they start, you know, doing other things. That's great, man. I think America's like that too, though. We're kind of open minded with certain sports, man.
Well, we were talking about that guy. One of the guys I'm curious to watch throughout the season, right? The firefighter who got eliminated early in the first season.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
he seems like, as far as physical endurance, he's one of the top guys. Like
Well, I
he
forgot.
destroyed the running part.
So what happened to him season one? Season one, I forgot. Like,
So he was one of the better people when it came to that hanging exercise that
right.
allowed them to choose their opponents. But
Uh-huh.
he chose a really big guy that maybe he assumed that he could outmaneuver.
Right.
But that big guy turned out to be pretty agile.
Oh, is it the first course, which
It was
is
the
like the
first,
ball?
yeah, yeah, and
The-
and he chose the course with the almost like the little obstacle course,
Oh, yeah, right.
court. So there was more room to run. But maybe his logic, he thought I could outmaneuver this big guy, but he turned out that the big guy ended up actually outmaneuvering him,
Damn.
and that big guy ended up making it to the top like 5 or so. So
Right.
excuse me. So I
Right.
mean, he ended up losing to a really good athlete, but yeah, it was just bad luck.
Right.
Bad luck, and I think looking back on that season 1 moment, it looked like he kind of froze. He kind of got flustered, wasn't sure what to do.
Yeah.
So it's good to see him, doing pretty well so far.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's not gonna make the same mistakes twice, man.
Yeah.
If you're getting a second chance, man, you gotta put your all in it.
Yeah. And as far as I know, he's the only one that's back,
Right.
from that first season.
Right.
So
Okay. Huh.
yeah, who'd you think stood out so far besides the fireman?
Um. My guy right now would be Andrea Jin, man.
Andre Jin?
Yeah, like I think he's doing great. He's playing, he's leading his team well as well.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think he's doing great. I haven't seen any obstacle that he like couldn't do.
Yeah. What do you think of that first maze challenge? Like, because it's an interesting combination.
The first thing I
Right.
thought about was like, oh crap, this is Pac-Man.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I thought of. But
Stealing
was-
supplies.
it was actually kind of confusing at first.
Yeah.
Like how I remember that guy, the football player, kept grabbing the barrels.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're supposed to do that, or is that like an extra?
So the barrels are supposed to be more weight.
Okay.
That's why. But I think also a disadvantage is they can take up a lot of space without letting you
Right.
fill it in with the bags.
Right.
But it's always interesting to see those team competitions. You know, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that stands out is because it's not just about the physical part, right? Even
Right.
though the name is Physical 100.
Right.
You got to have good strategy. You got to have good teamwork. You got to be able to make decisions on the fly like that. So
Right. It's also survival, man. Like the way it's natural instinct. Like how they were just stealing bags
and apologizing while they
Yeah.
were doing it. I'm sorry.
It's crazy. It's crazy. What do you think of all the martial arts contestants? You think they're
I mean, so far I'm not sure. Like even as far as combat sports, I mean, maybe when it comes to like a wrestler or an MMA
Yeah.
fighter or a judoka, it's hard to really show that you're excelling
right?
if you're not in contact with another human. You know,
right.
like when the MMA fighter, when he overcame that ridiculously strong dude,
Right.
right, Emmanuel, he overcame him with his technique. So I can see it that shining more when there's any sort of contest where you have to get past another person physically to get to an objective.
Right.
Right. So that's where it could shine. But in a situation like the maze thing, unless you're stealing their supplies, it's gonna be harder.
Well, I mean, because a lot of martial artists they do conditioning, they practice, right? So I think all that comes from them being able to use their abilities from their conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why it kind of like makes sense for like martial artists to be there,
Mm-hmm.
because they do have to do all those type of like obstacles and stuff, to get ready for their sports.
Yeah, and also I know several Muay Thai folks and MMA fighters who are kind of in their pro careers, and a lot of them either own CrossFit gyms or train seriously at a CrossFit gym. So
Yeah.
I always say that I like a lot of the exercises CrossFit programs do.
Mm-hmm.
Just a question of, and it, depending on the gym too, right? It's how they do those exercises. You know, what is the risk reward ratio when it comes to getting hurt versus becoming a high level performer.
Right. I mean, because I hear like a lot of times, like a lot of CrossFitters, they get injured a lot.
I have physical therapist friends who make jokes about how they should just set up their practice right beside a CrossFitter and CrossFit box, and just funnel the patients in from right next door, right? But
wow.
But I feel like in the past 15 years or so, they've really kind of cleaned up. It feels like they're getting much more scientific about how they train. They're getting much more aware of the safety issues.
Right.
Because you remember back in the day, they used to have those T-shirts that had like a rhabdo rupture on it, where it's like I might not be saying it correctly, rhabdomyolysis, where it's essentially your skeletal muscles break down because you overstrained it, and it can seep into your bloodstream. Yeah, but that kind of overtraining doesn't seem to happen quite as often, or at least maybe we just don't hear about it as much.
Right.
But I think CrossFitters are becoming a little bit more cautious of those kind of things too.
Wow. Where did CrossFit come from? Did it come during the hype of what's that movie? What's that movie called at that time? You remember that movie, Al? What was that? 300?
300.
Isn't it 300?
That was his own program.
Really?
That was his own program. No, I remember that. That was I
thought it was
still in
CrossFit.
college.
Like that's how CrossFit became.
Yeah, that guy's name was yeah, I remember that guy's name. He was Jim Jones.
Jim Jones.
Or Jim with GYM.
Okay.
At least that was his brand name. I don't know if that was his actual name.
Right.
And CrossFit actually started from this guy named Greg Glass.
Greg Glass.
He was a former gymnast, and then he started that program. Because I remember the first time I saw that was like my freshman year or maybe second year in college.
Right.
this is going back, 20 some years ago now. Um, and I saw people doing push-ups on the track and then running sprints, and they were saying we're doing CrossFit. I was like, that sounds intense. I don't know what that is.
Right.
But I remember at that time, because we were all college boys, we were trying to figure out the
Mm-hmm.
best way to get
Mm-hmm.
six packs, right? So it was compelling, and then you start looking up. I think a lot of that at that time, maybe just amongst dudes in their late teens, early 20s, you're just looking up all sorts of different ways to get
Right.
jacked, right? It's like, how did Brad Pitt look like that guy in Fight Club, or
Mm-hmm.
how did when the 300 came out? Yeah. Do you remember when that movie came out? Like,
Yeah, I went to go see it
Yeah.
the first time, and just knowing how, I mean, my ex at the time, she wanted to see it because all the men were showing their abs,
Yeah.
and she's saying like,
Showing their everything.
She was saying like all the women that's in the audience were like going crazy because of it. Right. So, how you like Physical 100 so far? You think this is better than season 1, or
Better filmed, like as we talk more about the episodes, we can get more into like some of the tasks, but definitely I would say better filmed.
better film?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, better filmed. Like fewer, there's not that main character, but there's more focus on a group of people or several
Right.
more people.
Right. I mean, right now, I don't really have I don't actually have a favorite character right now because it seems like there's a little bit too much that I mean, a lot of them are good.
Yeah.
Season 1, you kind of, like, who to pick. But season 2 is like a lot of them are good. So it's hard to pick which one.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about last time, right? There's so many different body types. There's people.
Right.
There's a pretty decent age range from like people in their 20s into their 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and
I mean, age does matter
Yeah.
when it comes to being physical.
oh, for sure,
Yeah.
like you feel it now.
Yeah.
Like being now, like
I mean, I'm 40, like 43 years old, and
yeah.
my body's not the same as I was younger.
And it's one of those things where a lot of times, like for me, I try to do stuff that I probably would have done when I was 19.
Yeah.
And at the time it feels fine, but the next day it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I can't eat like shit and not sleep and work out for
Right.
5 hours and not feel the difference, right? So
Right.
yeah, it's well, because martial arts requires so many different attributes. It's like
Right.
you gotta have fast twitch ability, you gotta have endurance,
Mhm.
you gotta have psychological fortitude,
Those are all important. Yeah.
flexibility, obviously, right? It's like I mean, you probably did some arts that involve kicking, right? So it's like
Yeah.
you gotta stretch a lot, you
Stretch
gotta
a
make
lot.
sure that you do a lot of the correct type of
Conditioning,
strength.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think if we were to talk about it in that way, it's like all those attributes of a good martial artist should be able to translate to all those things,
Mm-hmm.
right? But like so far, like with the ball battle,
Yeah.
that's probably the closest one, wouldn't you say? That's probably the closest one to being a martial arts combat.
Yeah. It's
Contest.
1-on-1. Correct. Yeah.
And then you got the maze. The maze is interesting because that's always just one of those team events that could eliminate some really top notch athletes, right? And some
Right.
top notch athletes did get eliminated, like
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
you didn't think would go out that early.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. But then again, like I would like to say the some of the martial arts, they did okay. I'll believe that their conditioning and their training kind of prepared them for that.
And also how well they know each other, right?
Yeah,
Like maybe that judoka, the senior judoka's team, he selected like 2 or 3 other judo players.
Right.
So maybe they, to a certain extent, knew each other, right? Because
Mhm.
they at least, when they were introducing everyone, they all kind of got together and said, "Oh man, this guy's a legend." I
Right.
started judo because of him, or something to
Right.
that effect, right?
Right.
So a lot of it is also like for the maze, like how well they can work as a team,
Right.
And who do
Was-
they select to do what?
Right. Out of all the martial arts, well, there's strikers too. Yeah, there's boxers, and you know what's the crazy part? I didn't know that Koreans would do that. There's a girl that does sanda in it.
Yeah,
That is
that
very
surprised me.
interesting. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, some of my friends are into Sandan nowadays, and well, not nowadays. They've been doing it for a long time. But it seems like it's a bit of a growing sport in that part of the world now. You
Yeah.
know, and coming over to the U.S. as well,
Right.
especially here in the Northeast where we are.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, Kung Lee kind of put it on the map a little bit though.
that dude,
Yeah.
that dude was one of my icons growing up.
Right.
In a way, even though I didn't do sanda at the time, and but he was one of the few people who were Asian who were dominating in those respective combat sports. This was like really early UFC. We're talking like
Right.
Frank Shamrock.
Yeah,
days,
Frank Shamrock days, correct.
Yeah, so like for Kunle to be doing stuff like that at that time, it was really cool to see. Even though at the
Yeah.
time, it wasn't like nowadays you could pull them up on YouTube.
Right.
Back then, it was just like a few pictures, like a few articles about him. But it was really cool to see. Like at that time, there weren't too many active Asian American fighters like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting.
But
What did that Sana girl did good? I don't remember seeing her anymore.
she lost to that weightlifting girl.
Oh,
Yeah, it went to like
crap.
a double overtime. That was a really compelling match because they were like the same size. They were very close.
Yeah, okay.
And there was a joke about, did you just pick me because I'm the shortest one, right? And but no, they went at it. They went at it pretty well.
Right.
And props to that weightlifting girl.
Oh
for
man,
winning.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah,
scene.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because she had no combat experience, but she had just her strength from
Right.
her Olympic weightlifting programs. Oh, that heavyweight boxer who also somehow knew how to grapple. The guy with the sleeve
The
tattoo.
guy with the sleeve
yeah,
tattoos. Yeah.
the massive. I think he was
Yeah.
a left-hander. That guy's terrifying.
He's terrifying, but at the same time, it's kind of like, I mean, smile a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. He kind of had that look the whole time, like
I think that's why everybody would kind of like didn't want to pick him,
little bit.
but he didn't seem too friendly,
He didn't. But I gotta admit, I did like his attitude because he was just
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, you think I can't grapple because I'm a boxer? All right, well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna show you. And he
Yeah.
he suplexed that guy.
Yeah.
I think the guy was
He's
like
a pro wrestler.
yeah. Oh yeah, professional wrestler. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I
he was
knew
a
he had
pro
some sort
wrestler.
of grappling background.
Yeah.
That's the other part that was kind of cool to see too. Like not necessarily the pro wrestling bit, but seeing the traditional Korean wrestlers. I can never pronounce it correctly. The Surium.
I don't know.
Korean, but it's like
Korean
that Korean
folk,
sand
folk
wrestling, right?
I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah.
I guess it's almost like it looks from the outside looking in, it looks kind of close to sumo as far as the rule set, the setting, the fact that you can grab the belts, right?
Right.
I know there's differences. I just don't really know what they are.
I mean, every different culture has some kind of folk wrestling.
It's cool to see. Yeah, it's cool to see. It's interesting just how universal that is.
Yeah.
Like from Korea to China to Mongolia to India,
Yeah.
all across the old Silk Road into
Right,
Europe,
right.
into the Americas, I'm sure.
Right.
But yeah, all those things, I feel like physically, if you were to encompass all these martial arts from like wrestling to grappling to striking, to different those different folk styles, in theory, they should be able to handle all those things. Right, because all the conditioning around it should go into that, right? All these strength and conditioning methods evolved because you were trying to train these warriors to be stronger and fitter and more flexible, whatever you need, right? But it was cool to see when they were doing the railroad carts.
Yeah.
Because that part was, one, you had to make sure you picked the right guy.
Right.
And two, you had to keep a cool mind. Because remember those parts where the carts went off the tracks a little bit?
Yeah.
And that slowed you down. If you didn't keep a cool mind, you weren't going to catch up.
Right. Because it does get frustrating, and when you get frustrated, your mind's already messed up. That one contestant, I felt so bad for him, but at the same time, I felt like, why did the team leader choose him to do the first run of that?
Yeah, I mean
What was his background?
I can't remember now, but he just wasn't very big.
Yeah, he was. He was quite. I mean, he was fit for his size, but I don't know what he did. I don't know what his background was.
Yeah. I wonder if Al can find that. But like, I think with something like that, beyond a certain point, you just had to have a bigger body, because then you
Right.
could just lean in and you can let your body weight do some of the
Right.
work for you, let
Right.
gravity do the work. Because like when Thanos was pushing it, it was even when he loaded the cars full, he was able to drive
Right.
it back
Right.
fairly easily.
Yeah.
And it was interesting too, because for that one, endurance mattered a lot less than we thought it would.
Right.
Because remember some of the guys that were saying, "Oh, we got more endurance, we can go back and forth more often." But one guy had less endurance, but he loaded
Right.
almost all of it onto there.
Right.
And he just had to take one trip.
Right.
The others had to take 2 or 3, and they didn't make it in time compared to the other guys.
What was his second? The girl, she's a judoka.
Judoka, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that team selected several judoka for that team,
Yeah. Yeah.
for that group.
And it was hard for her, as well. I don't. She couldn't push it,
Yeah,
and it was crazy. But then at the end, I love the camaraderie. Like like they felt bad. They gotta show him some support. But I mean, it is kind of. If that was me, I'd be so embarrassed.
I would have been embarrassed. Yeah, when they came down to all help and push, it's like if it can feel a little patronizing, right?
Yeah.
If you're just looking at it that way.
Yeah.
But that whole show is such a mind entanglement, right? Because at the same time, only one's gonna be left standing. But to get to that point, you still need to kind of use the other cast members as teammates.
Right.
But then at some point, you got to try to eliminate them too. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a lot. I'm sure the mental game is very, very underrated. Something
Right.
like that.
Right. I mean, that's what kept us on our toes. Like especially when that one team got certain teams got eliminated,
Yeah.
and then they had a chance to fight back to get
That
their
was
seat,
crazy.
and they had to hug that, like, what is it, that pole?
Yeah, they had a hug around
Yeah.
the logo too.
Yeah.
I think they couldn't just hug any part of the pole.
The most interesting part is those two wrestlers, the high school wrestler and Olympic. Is he Olympic wrestler?
Yeah, he was like an Olympic gold
Yeah.
medalist from '04 or something. Yeah.
And how they were like the last two was crazy.
Yeah. Well, also how they collaborated, because
Yeah.
I think 1-on-1 they wouldn't have been able to beat Thanos,
Yeah.
but they ended up pulling Thanos off. So, but then he ended up getting picked anyway.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting strategy on the part of the wrestler, because
Yeah.
I guess his thought process was, all right, I'm just gonna pick the strongest lineup I can get, because he just
Right.
picked the strongest out of the remaining people,
Right.
which also goes to show what we were talking about earlier, right? How different minor decisions and strategy can eliminate a lot of those top athletes, and he ended up pulling some of those eliminated athletes back. Like
Yeah.
he had Amati, right? Who else did he have?
Of course, Thanos. He brought Thanos
Yeah,
back, right?
The Kabaddi player,
Uh-huh.
and then there's another one. Who's that guy? The rower with a headband.
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
He was thinner, but you could tell he had the physicality just
Right.
from his like lats, right?
Right.
Like when you see a rower, you see those massive lats, like the Bruce Lee flex, right?
Yeah,
in Return
yeah,
of the Dragon.
I don't know who else, but those are the main guys that I know.
Yeah. I think that was the team. That was
Yeah.
they call them the Team Avengers now, right? So
Yeah, is it on the last episode? I haven't seen all of it, man. I'm just still stuck on 4.
yeah. The episodes have all come out, and yeah, it's compelling, man. We'll get into
it's
that.
done, right?
Yeah. We'll get into
Oh,
that when we
okay.
get to those. But yeah, it's very compelling to see who makes it and what they set up later on.
Mm. No, it's very entertaining, man. I got into it, man. Like you think season 2? Like, you think everybody feels the same way how we do? Because not a lot of people are talking about it right now.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Like they were talking about season 1, but season 2, there's just like, oh,
Maybe the novelty's gone. Maybe the fact that there was a little controversy at the end of season 1
yeah,
about maybe the results were rigged.
yeah,
That might have gone into a little bit also. And the guy who won season 1, he kind of came out of nowhere. Like he wasn't really featured very much up until that point. So
right,
maybe fans felt a little bit of a letdown.
yeah,
But really, I mean, Netflix is leading the charge a lot of ways in how they're portraying a lot of different Asian shows or shows that are featuring Asian characters.
Right.
So I can imagine that they'll continue if the ratings are high enough.
Right.
And it's already a pretty fascinating idea. Just taking the Asian factor out is already just a fascinating idea to think of. Okay, what's the best body?
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's like something we talked about in exercise science all the time. It's like the idea of a hybrid athlete, right? Someone who has strength but also has endurance and also has mobility and also has a good amount of speed, but also can also hold their own physically as far as moving a lot of weight.
Well, I'm just happy that they're showcasing a lot of Asian people that's in this type of field. I know it. To me, it feels good when my non-Asian friends are like, dude, I didn't know Asians were built like this.
Well, it's funny though, because like it's been there for a long time. A lot of Asian countries do really well in Olympic weightlifting. A lot of them do well in gymnastics. That takes a ton of strength,
Yeah.
But I guess maybe the more visible sports in the U.S., Asians don't tend to do that well in like basketball or track and field, baseball. Actually, no, they do pretty well in baseball.
They do pretty well.
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Basketball too. I know. You're gonna have a lot of Asian fans who's gonna hate us because you said that shit.
Basketball, well, comparatively, right? Because I know like we had Yao Ming, we had a few other top level Asian basketball players.
Jeremy Lin,
yeah. But I guess it's more like it doesn't happen very often, right? There's not like a constant supply. So it's.
But I think there is now though, because they have now they have a Cambodian football player. They have like some couple Filipino players now.
Shout out to those Trailblazers, man. Dat Nguyen back in the 90s with the Cowboys.
Dat
Nguyen, yeah. Because I remember.
I actually don't remember this guy. What?
Yeah. He was a linebacker.
So Vietnamese guy that was
Vietnamese guy in the 1990s. Yeah, he was.
What?
Yeah,
I never heard of this.
He was born. I can't remember if he was born or raised, but he grew up in a refugee camp in Arkansas.
Look it up, Al. I want to know who this guy is.
Nguyen, he was a linebacker for the Cowboys. Because I remember at the time.
Wait, how long ago was this?
It's like the mid 90s, I want to say.
What? I never heard of this dude.
Yeah, because I remember at the time, I was watching. I mean, I was like in grade school at the time, so I wasn't watching a lot of football yet. But I remember I knew the name Nguyen was a Vietnamese name, and I saw the uniform. I was like, hang on a second, that says Nguyen.
Dat Nguyen?
Yeah.
And what's his He was a linebacker for the Cowboys.
And pretty. Yeah, he was pretty good too, right? Like I think he started.
How come I never knew of this guy?
I was gonna say the same thing.
I think his career didn't last very long, right?
No.
Like,
I'm not sure. Let me
yeah, but either way, like he was there. He was one of the main. He was one of the. I think he was a starter for the Cowboys for a while.
Oh wow.
But yeah, he wasn't just a bench warmer, so it was cool to see at that time,
Wow, damn. Wonder what he's doing now. It's probably like coaching or some shit.
Coaching, yeah. I mean, I think he did stay in the Texas area, so yeah. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah.
He was part of the Cowboys. He played for the Cowboys from '99 to 2005.
99 to 2005. Wow, yeah. I don't
So he
know.
played for a while, yeah.
He coached for the Cowboys from 2007.
He coached for the Cowboys?
For 2007 to 2009.
Oh, snap.
He was the assistant linebacker quality control coach. And then from 2010 to 2011, he was coaching for Texas A&M. He was the inside backers coach.
Yeah, I think that's where he went to school also.
Wow,
Yeah, I think he went to Texas A&M. So he was like a standout guy too. So it was interesting to see.
Wow. Never knew.
How do we
That's
get here?
crazy. Huh?
How do we get here? Oh, because you were talking about how more Asians are getting into basketball and different mainstream American sports, right?
No, I was talking about how Physical 100 like kind of opened the eyes for a lot of people now.
Yeah.
But then you kind of mentioned that, it's been like that, but then it's just not, it's not blown up,
Yeah, and I guess also like for me, I grew up seeing a decent number of athletic Asians, right, in different areas, martial arts especially. So I guess for me, it's like I knew that the non-Asian world might have seen us a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew that also that wasn't true because of what I'd actually witnessed, you know. And
Right.
I mean, I guess the most obvious one is Bruce Lee. Is like, how can you deny like the athletic potential of an Asian person when you see something like that, you know?
Right.
I mean,
I hear it all the time. Like, there's some people would downplay the Asians. Say, well, I mean, you just say Bruce Lee is very unique. He's different among other Asians. It's like, I feel like a lot of Asians do have that potential as well too, but they just make it seem like it's just one particular Asian that has that ability, but nobody else has.
yeah. And I mean that dude was uniquely talented, but
Yeah.
people still had to teach him.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
People still had to push him during training.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of those guys were people from Hong Kong,
Yeah.
who were Asian. So yeah, so it's one of those things where it's almost like we don't want to believe it on a certain level.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the wrong phrasing, but either way, it's almost like those of us who grew up in the U.S., right, different Asian Americans, it's almost like we get surprised when we see it a lot of times too, which is
Yeah.
a little bit strange for me.
What do you mean by that?
Almost like we appreciate the fact that Bruce Lee can do what he does,
Okay.
but it's almost like there's a certain level of acceptance that he's a flash in the pan or he's a once in a generation, right? And so,
Okay.
and it's one of those things like, for me, I wouldn't say I'm a top level athlete, but I would say I'm a pretty decent athlete,
Yeah.
right? And I would tell my friends and my family, I was like, okay, we technically have the same genetics, right? If you want to call it Asian genetics, whatever that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a difference between me and you, and not even tooting my own horn. I've just been doing it, and they haven't,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it is a much more of a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, I believe.
What did that dude mean to you? Like, what was the first time you saw him? What was that like?
First time, I mean, I was growing up. I was always watching. To be honest, like, I didn't get into Bruce Lee like until I was like 10.
Okay.
Okay, but growing up, the only Asian idols I was looking to was Dustin's from 21 Jump Street.
Dustin Nguyen.
Yeah,
now in Warrior.
Yeah. And then when my dad introduced me to a lot of the kung fu movies, and it had Bruce Lee, and I was like, wow, this guy's crazy. He's just so different.
You know, the first time I saw Dustin Nguyen was in VIP.
Whoa, that was later on.
Pam Anderson, yeah. Yeah.
With Pamela Anderson?
I think she was in that show too.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
That thing looked like, if you watch it now, it looks like porn.
I need to check that again, but yeah. But Dustin Nguyen was cool in that show because I remember looking at him, I was like,
Yeah.
no, he can fight, he's slick, he acts chill. So yeah, I remember being fascinated by that character also.
I just remember it being a little bit cringy though.
It was, yeah, because I remember a scene where they were in a nightclub,
Yeah.
and just the dancing that they were doing. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that was on like a network show on Saturday mornings at that time.
Was it
'cause
popular? I don't remember.
I don't think so. I think it was like one of those like fringe shows. Because you
Yeah.
remember UPN, like back in the 90s?
UPN. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was on that, but it was on like Saturday at like 11 o'clock. So I think most people weren't really watching TV at
Saturday, like 11 p.m.
11 a.m.
Dude, that's like Saturday cartoons for us. Like,
But it was
why
like,
would they play that in the morning?
yeah, I don't know. But I remember it was Saturdays because, I wasn't in school, so I was watching it.
So while I was watching cartoons, you were watching VPN. That's crazy, man.
Yeah, I guess so. Or right afterwards. But
Why? Were you fascinated that there was an Asian guy in the whole?
there was definitely that. I mean, part of it was because, Pam Anderson was on that show. And also the fact that, yeah, Dustin Nguyen was on there, and he was the only Asian character in that show.
Right.
I mean, the other part was when he was playing that goofy role in Three Ninjas Kickback. When he was playing one like the punk rockers.
Yeah.
But yeah. So my first time seeing Bruce Lee, that was actually after I already started practicing martial arts. Right? So,
Really?
like, yeah, because like
Did you practice martial arts in the later years? Like
I
your
was a
teen?
teenager. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was after middle school.
Yeah.
I'd always been into it. Like I always watched like those like wuxia like martial arts films and
Yeah.
Shaw Brothers and Jackie Chan, Jet Li,
Right.
Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, right? So it's like a combination of like Western and Eastern sources of media that I was eating up at that
Yeah.
time. And at that time, as far as like the stunts go, there wasn't as much compared to like Jackie Chan. Like, he wasn't jumping off of buildings.
Right.
He wasn't like hang gliding across a crowded city or falling down 5 stories in a mall. But
Right.
one of the things that caught me was just the raw screen presence that he brought, right? The intensity that he brought, the power and the explosiveness in his actual screen combat movement.
Right.
So that caught me, and like looking back on it now, looking back on Enter the Dragon now, you start to appreciate it more because
Right.
of who he included also.
How it really got introduced to Bruce Lee was because growing up, I grew up in the ghetto,
Right.
and so going to school was among the Hispanics and blacks,
Okay.
and I didn't know anything about Bruce Lee, but they did,
Okay.
and they kept growing up with them. They kept calling me Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan,
Right.
and I always got curious, like, who the hell is this Bruce Lee guy? So I would ask my dad, like, who the hell is Bruce Lee? And then he started showing me movies of him. So I was like, oh, okay.
So you had to go. You kind of got introduced from the outside
Yeah,
of the
pretty
Asian world.
much.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they were kind of making fun of me. That's how I found out. But
right.
and my dad had to explain it to me, like, oh, they're making fun of you when they call you Bruce Lee. Remember that? Because at first I was like, yeah, you call me Bruce Lee. Yeah, that's
Right. Yeah. There's always a little bit of that, right? They come
Yeah.
up to you, and like different people will come up to you like, "What?" They do that
Yeah,
shit, right?
yeah.
So it's so that's always there. Yeah. So like, well, for me, I'm the only one in my family that's really into martial arts.
Right.
Growing up, it's like it's a lot of stereotypical stuff, right?
Right.
It's like do well in school,
Mhm.
go to a good college, and make a good career for yourself. So
Kind of sounds like a typical Asian upbringing in a way, right?
yeah. Especially here, like parents being immigrants,
Mhm.
that was kind of the only way to really make it and become stable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't much of a network they could fall back on.
Right.
So like, of course, what worked for them is what they're going to emphasize to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, did that the best I could, but of course, being a kid, you still want an outlet,
Right.
right? Being socially accepted or respected is still going to be important for anybody, but especially for someone going into preteens and in their teenage years. So, plus the fact that I always just liked it. I always liked watching Shaw Brothers growing up. I always liked watching wuxia
Yeah.
shows growing up, and I just admired those people so much. Right, the idea that Jackie Chan could take on 30 guys using
right.
ladders and
Yeah,
chairs
yeah.
and jumping off buildings. So that was my thought process. And like Jet Li can somehow fight off 10 guys without breaking a sweat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my goal, my thought process when I started practicing.
Right.
And at some point, my parents just kind of realized, okay, we need to get this kid an outlet of some kind, right? Because I played, like a little bit of baseball, a little bit of basketball here and there. And,
Yeah.
And I was always a hyperactive kid. So they let me do it, and I just kind of stuck with it for the most part throughout.
Right.
A little bit off and on here and there, but just kind of continued throughout.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, and eventually that ended up affecting my career path a little bit, like going from engineering to exercise science, do my own training a little bit as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
And part of that did have to do with learning about Bruce Lee later on, how much he emphasized physical attributes, physical fitness, how much he really put importance into being conditioned as well. So
Right.
that was always the case. And, of course, once you spar with someone, you learn very quickly just how important it is to develop some level of athletic ability,
Right.
right? Because I remember the first time I sparred was with one of my buddies, and if you just saw him, you would think he was just a laughing, goofy kid.
Right.
right? And maybe he didn't look as good on the forums as I did. So I was like, oh, it's gonna be an easy walk in the park. Nope. Still remember the first kick he gave me in my ribs.
Right.
Yeah,
You
but
know, they state Mike Tyson said it best. He said, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face."
yeah,
So, like I mean, you there's some people that you can't read. So, especially when it comes to sparring, I mean, did you think that he wasn't good? Is that why? Was that your mindset the whole time?
or that he wasn't as good as me.
Oh, okay.
You know, so that or that he wouldn't have the ability to fight as I did.
Right.
I was wrong.
Right.
I learned that real quickly. But is cool because one of those things that it does teach you how to do is not underestimate anyone.
Right.
You know, because like as I've done different arts, like you see different gyms with people who have those who have those like muscle and fitness appearances. And you think, oh man, they could punch through a brick wall, but it turns out they give up against kind of like the dumpy looking kid who looks like he just got out of bed 20 minutes ago.
Right.
So it definitely shows you a lot, and,
Right.
It's taught me a lot. Is at this point now is a big part of my network of friends and family.
Right.
Now I'm recently teaching my wife as well. So it's so that's one of those things where I remember being as a kid, no one else wanted to talk about it with me. Like being a kid in high school, I remember my friends actually got annoyed and they would walk away because I kept talking to them about it. And but nowadays it's kind of gone the opposite direction.
Right.
So I'm pretty thankful for that.
Speaking of which, not to cut you off, Frank right here is actually having a seminar where the Grandmaster is coming soon. Was it May 18th?
May 18th. So we're having our Grandmaster Bobby Tabuada come
yeah.
over. He's one of the pillars in the FMA community,
Right.
the Filipino martial arts community. So he'll be coming over from North Carolina May 18th over in Elizabeth, New Jersey. It's gonna be held at the Gateway Family YMCA in Elizabeth. So
If people are interested, get in contact. We'll leave an email in our posts, and you can get contact with Frank if you guys are interested in coming.
Yeah, and we welcome all backgrounds, all experience levels. So it'll be a fun day. It'll be a fun day. It's always a fun time when Grandmaster comes into town.
Right.
He'll share his skills. He's still got
Right.
incredible speed, power, and ability in his mid-70s.
Right.
And it's always just a fun time. It's like a family reunion a little bit.
Right.
We want to see the guy.
Yeah.
So also good at karaoke. He's also good at karaoke. So.
It's gonna be my first time meeting him, but it'll be interested to meet him. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of jokes, a lot of good training, good food
Right.
also.
Yeah. Can't wait for the food. That's all I know.
You gotta be ready to sing karaoke too. You know that, right?
I can't sing
Al,
for shit.
Al, you ready?
Al can sing.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
I might duet with you. We'll see.
We'll do a 3-man.
Right.
I don't know what a 3-man is. It's not a duet. It's a I don't know what it would be called.
Trio.
Trio.
Is it a
There
trio?
we go. Yeah. Close enough.
Right. Well, going back to it, my upbringing was different from yours. Coming from a Southeast Asian background, like we,
Okay.
Most of the time we were poor,
Right.
and we I like I mentioned before, I grew up in the ghetto, and the only thing that we just gotta basically watch our backs all the time. Being Asian, growing up in the hood is not, they pick on you a lot. I'm sure that's with where you live. I'm sure they pick on you, but I think
Yeah.
they pick on you the most because they don't understand your culture. They think it's weird what you guys do, right? And so the only thing that relates to having friends at that time was because of like Bruce Lee, and they're like, oh man, can you do and that's what made me have friends, was because of like those Bruce Lee movies and stuff like that. Because just because you're an Asian kid,
Yeah.
they're just like, oh, like, can you do this type of stuff that Bruce Lee can do? I used to think it was annoying until when I got picked on and I got beat up. That's when my dad, he's like, what, time to put you in martial arts school,
So your
So
parents actually pushed you towards it.
my mom didn't want me to do it. She wanted me to play guitar,
Okay.
right?
Musical instrument. Yeah.
Yeah, but my dad was like, "Nah, you're gonna do martial arts, right?"
Mm.
And my dad was kind of different from other Asian dads. He was more like, "You need to put your foot down," Because I
Mm.
think the difference is like my I feel like my dad is not that typical Asian dad. He was tatted up too,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and he was always the type that's like he'll fight back. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't hide things. So he didn't want me to be that kid that's always gonna like run away if some shit goes down.
Right. Right. Right.
So he took me to my first taekwondo school,
Mm.
and then from like maybe a couple years later, then I transitioned to like Muay Thai, Cambodian mixed martial, Cambodian kickboxing as well.
Okay.
So um martial arts did help me in terms of like feeling more confident, and it kind of helped me stood my ground. I
Right.
wasn't,
Right.
it also kind of helped me because when I was little I was overly shy all the time as well, but it
Mm-hmm.
kind of like boosted me up to like talk to people more, gave me enough confidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
um yeah, growing up was just like that, and then it kind of like when things hit the fan, like everything was just kind of like changing. And growing up in California at the time, the gang culture was popular,
Okay.
so we had that
Yeah.
type of element in it. And growing up in California, you had all the Asians and the Hispanics and the blacks kind of like separated in a way. Even in
Right.
even in like
Right.
junior high, it was kind of like that during lunch.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And but all I know is it's like what the Asians had was like different from everybody else, is like they can fight, you
Mm.
know.
They
What,
studied.
yeah, without guns they can fight because of their like growing up like from their culture.
Uh-huh.
Like the Vietnamese had their, and the Cambodians, the Laos, or whatever, they had an upbringing with fighting.
So it was more cultural for you
Yeah,
guys.
more cultural in
Yeah.
a way. Necessarily at that time we didn't have a lot of the Chinese or the Korean elements in it,
Right. Right.
but they were there too.
Right. Right. Yes. It sounds like just such a different upbringing over on the
Yeah,
West Coast compared to the East Coast where
yeah,
I
yeah,
grew up, right?
yeah.
Because like also I grew up in the not quite the deep South, but also the South, right? So there was the population was a little smaller. We were there. Like I grew up around other Chinese, around Filipinos, around Vietnamese,
Right,
around. Looking back on it, I think there were also some Cambodians. I just didn't know at the time.
right.
Um, but
I would feel
we
more dominant like Vietnamese, right,
a
from the
lot of
south.
Vietnamese, decent amount of Hmong, um, Filipinos. There's also a good
Whoa,
number.
wow, Hmong.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah, yeah.
okay, wow. I
Some
thought there was
Koreans.
just like Minnesota.
There's
You
some
know.
Hmong from where I'm from. Yeah, not just in Minnesota.
Oh wow.
Also down towards the southeast region of the U.S. as well.
Mm,
And it's fascinating to hear you talk about your upbringing because from when I grew up in that side of, I guess we could call it Asian America, right?
right.
You don't hear much about Asians in the hood or Asians in the ghetto,
Yeah.
right? I guess those at that time there really wasn't much contact
Yeah.
between those segments of the population. Um, and I think part of the reason I was able to meet some who were from maybe not quite, who were from maybe like the other side of the track, so to speak, what was because of martial arts. Because a lot of them, I remember some of my friends who were Thai or Laos, right? They
Mhm.
were also into MMA. They were also into kickboxing,
Right.
watching Bruce Lee movies. Um, and as you get to know them, they start sharing with you a little bit about their upbringing. It's just very different, very different than what I grew up with,
Yeah.
and kind of get into how our different families are right in the U.S., right? Just
Mhm.
different circumstances. So, yeah, it's interesting because it's interesting to see that this media portrayal of martial arts it can kind of affect all of us in kind of the same way,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of a similar way, because there wasn't a gang culture growing up, but there was the thought of, okay, I have to be able to stand my own ground. I have to
Right.
be able to not be afraid if I walk into a room full of strangers,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or go into a different high school, whatever the case may be, right? So, when it comes to that was actually one of my reasons for starting, aside from the fact that I loved watching all those shows, right? Um, and all those movies, was I needed something to help myself be less afraid. I needed something to
You
help
need
myself.
something to boost up your confidence. And
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and in a legitimate way, right? Not just trying to give myself a routine to tell myself something without actual physical action to
Right.
back it up, so to speak. Like,
Do you feel like it's working now?
I'll say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just physical exercise by itself can
Oh.
help decrease anxiety, help decrease the risk of depression,
Right.
right? Help your mental health overall. And the other aspect is just strengthening yourself physically. That's very important.
Mhm.
Being able to have the understanding that you can react physically in a way, right? That I think that's very good for your psychological stability,
Mm-hmm.
right? Knowing, and it doesn't even have to be a fight. It could be like, oh, I can react if there's like if there's an unexpected accident. I can run away if need be. I can pick things up and move it around. So
Right. Right.
so all those things, and obviously the aspect with self defense if it comes down to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think there's a reason that so many people here so many Asian Americans gravitate towards a figure like Bruce Lee,
Yeah.
right? Or whatever that person might represent.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
so
there's some cases Asians at that time doesn't want to even do martial arts because
I heard that too.
they don't
Yeah.
want to make the stereotype stronger.
Sure,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I heard that a lot growing up
Yeah.
too. I think people are saying that less now.
Yeah.
But definitely growing up in the '90s, you hear about that too. It's like, oh, we don't want to be known as just the kung fu master who's one dimensional in his life, and
Yeah, that's the thing too. When I used to own a film comeback school, which we teach actors just movements, not to do
Right.
stunts, but just movements. That way they can work well with other stunt guys if they're ever in a fight scene. Well, a lot of these Asian actors that comes into the studio,
sure,
they admit they're starting to learn it now because they see how martial arts can benefit them in like action scenes and
Right.
stuff like that. But they would hesitate to do it because they didn't want to enhance the stereotype stronger, But they started to see that it's a niche now for them. So now they're coming in and getting it done,
yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of goes back to just a bit of a desire to fit in.
Yeah.
Right. So even if maybe somebody could be beneficial to you physically and psychologically, if you feel like you get made fun of it, you're gonna kind of want to stray away from it, right? And
Right.
I feel like a lot of Asians who grow up here, and I was one of those too, right? Like we're very sensitive to potential social ostracization, right? We don't want to be seen as an outsider too much, right? Beyond a certain point.
Right.
Yeah, that's something I kind of thought about for a while as well. I guess for me, maybe it was luck. Maybe it was just how my mind happened to be wired at the time. I never personally cared.
Yeah, I didn't care. I didn't care that was the stereotype. I loved it.
Yeah, I loved
Yeah.
it too, cause
I mean, I was still hood no matter what. you know?
and I mean, you hear from people, cause one of my clients I used to train with, he was a Filipino man in his 60s at the time, and he said that around the time that Enter the Dragon came out, he was probably maybe in grade school, but from his story, overnight people respected him more because they kind of assumed that he knew stuff like that too.
Yeah, there was you have some people that respect you, or they have some people that like make fun of you. But I think the ones that make fun of you, I think they're more scared of you.
Yeah. Or at least they're a little bit more wary, right?
Yeah.
Like when they kind of make those pantomime moves or
Yeah.
make the sound that
Yeah.
Bruce Lee made. Yeah, for me it was. I mean, it's always annoying. It's
Yeah.
never fun to hear, but it's kind of like, okay, well,
Yeah.
you do that. I'm just gonna keep practicing. You know.
I don't hear Bruce Lee nowadays. I hear mostly Jackie Chan now, or like Gundam style,
Gundam style.
or now they say what coronavirus. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
only
yeah,
thing
yeah,
I hear
yeah,
nowadays.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They don't use those terms anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe a sign of the times.
Yeah,
It has been. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's always gonna be a new thing,
yeah,
right? They're always gonna try to pick on someone that they think of as different in a different way, whatever the
right,
latest thing is.
right.
Yeah, and now now that the man's been gone for about 50, almost 51 years now.
That's crazy though.
Yeah, half a century, right? It's been
Yeah.
nuts, and he's still, like, in some ways, he's still just as popular as ever, if not more so, right?
Mhm.
Because thanks to his daughter, thanks to the estate, um, trying to continue to promote his image,
Mhm.
right? But what's interesting is that what's interesting is that there's fewer and fewer of his contemporaries. So I'm curious to see what that image is going to look like down the line as people who personally knew the man, they're either older or, passing.
Right.
So, but either way, like, he is definitely an important icon just because of the image, but also, like, if you actually research his life is, in my opinion, a lot more compelling than a lot of the myths. Because
Mhm.
you're talking about a 19-year-old kid who came to the U.S. on his own.
Right.
He had to literally come on a boat, right? He was literally fresh off the boat, and he had to challenge all these well-established kung fu people. And these weren't your strip mall kung fu people, right? Like
Yeah.
you hear about the scenes, like these were some serious people,
Mhm.
and maybe had done some,
They always
untoward
have.
things.
Yeah. They always have. They always have some kind of triad element in you know some kind of backup.
Yeah, and just
You know.
to be willing to challenge that by yourself
Yeah.
when you're 19, that shows kind of like just the courage that you had. Maybe some of the maybe some of the recklessness that he had at the time too. But it was just very interesting that he was able to do what he did in a time where there wasn't a Bruce Lee,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, you kind of feel you can relate to it because we were all young once, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was young, I was more fit and more muscular, and I felt I was fearless. I felt like I could fight anybody.
Right, right.
I'm guessing what he went through was that. He was basically he wanted. He's like he's young. He feels fearless. He wants to put his name. I don't think necessarily put his name out. I think he just wanted to be able to put his foot down and say like this is who I am. Like.
Mm-hmm. Like Bruce Lee really starting that thought of
Mhm.
that culture of Asian physicality, right? And it really kind of continuing in different ways and like culminating into this season 2 of Physical 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about the rest of the contest, and
I think I think this season is pretty good. I don't know how everybody feels about it, but
I enjoy it.
I think the outcome is going to be great.
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's definitely and really is never a bad thing to encourage different Asians living in the West to get into a more physical pursuit.
Right.
Because I know a few who work very serious white collar jobs,
Right.
and they try to do this kind of thing on the side, right? Like one woman I went to college with, she was I believe she's a chemical engineer now, and she does powerlift or Olympic lifting. Even at the time, I remember hearing that she wanted to look at different martial arts as well. And her brother was the same, so I'm sure there's
She's
a lot.
Asian, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Wow.
yeah. And her brother was the same. Like her brother was very serious into martial arts at the time. I did lion dancing with him, and and I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there like that. I mean, just the fact that you have to sit in an office for 60 hours a week, or cubicles for 60 hours a week, whatever their positions may be.
Mhm.
I'm sure they want to have this, right? And
Right.
so it's good to it's good to see that aspect where it's just the sheer physicality that's being shown.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is, talking about breaking stereotypes or breaking the image. I think part of that's for us too. Like we got to see that too. We kind of got to be reminded, maybe remind us the correct term for it as well.
Yeah, I feel the same, man. We should keep talking and keep discussing about this thing. But I'm looking forward just finishing up on Physical 100, and then we'll talk it again.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear what you think when you see the new task come out.
Yeah.
When you see the new test come out. So right now, we talk about the push carts or the railroad carts and the sandbags. The next one's more compelling.
All right.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, same.
All right, guys. We're ending this.